Hello, this is a tutorial for Clip Studio Paint for new correction layers or adjustment layers. So this is a painting that I made, and has purples, has deep reds, and has blues, and I think it's a pretty good painting to adjust for later post-processing. Layer adjustments are usually used for post-processing when you finish with the painting, and it's used a lot in photography as well. So if you know photography, you know how to use some of them already. First of all, you need to learn how to make one. You can create a destructive one, which is going to be on one layer only, but easier and better would be a non-destructive one. If you go to Layer, New Correction Layer, you have a whole list of them. A quick and easy way would be learning either shortcuts, or there's a hidden shortcut for all of the panel. If you hit Alt, you can see letters that are highlighted. So if you click the next letter that is here, for example L for layers, I click L, now you have opened this. And it's pretty useful if you don't want to memorize some shortcuts, or you have shortcuts that are not assigned. For example, convert layer is not a shortcut, as you can see right here, or rasterize is not a shortcut. So then you can do it through the Alt option. So Alt L, and as you can see highlighted, correction layer is G actually. So G, and now we can summon these at any moment that we want. So if you click one, for example, levels, it's going to be opened and you're going to see this. So you're going to be using this. And once you click OK and you did your adjustments, you can see that it is on top of the previous layer that I was selecting, which was the painting, and it already has a mask. If people don't know what a mask is basically what is the area that is going to be affecting. So if I have a white mask, then it's affecting the entire canvas. Through here I have eraser, and I have it on rough, which is a hard brush, so we can see it more clearly. So I can crank it up, click the layer mask, and just paint on top. And now everything else is getting affected except whatever is black on the mask. But I also added this little panel. This little panel is a general reference for colors, so that it's not only affecting this painting, it's also affecting the basic colors, so you can see what is happening. Very simply put, this is a basic gradient from black to white. This is a very standard way of choosing colors. It is cool color, which is blue, which is usually dark, and warm color, which is either yellow or orange, that is white. So you can see that in between there's purple. On the color wheel, you can see that this and this are actually on the opposite sides. And you also can see the basic colors that are for each corner of the color wheel. So the first one, I just go from top to bottom, and I go brightness and contrast. That one is a pretty easy one to understand. So if I crank it up, it is best to use it all the way and see what it does, and then you can, for example, click it, and then you dial it down in terms of opacity to see what is happening exactly. If I double click, you can see that for this one, I have contrast all the way to 50. And it creates more contrast and it saturates your colors. And you can see this blacks became more apparent and whites became more apparent. There's less gray and all the colors became more saturated. Contrast of -50 is doing obviously the opposite. It's going to be desaturating things and lightening up things. The next one is pretty much the top one is the brightness. I'm actually going to add a full sheet of all of these next to each other somewhere in the description, so you can see that each one does different effect, and you can just see and compare them on the same picture. So it's a little cheat sheet you're gonna see. So hopefully it's gonna be useful for somebody. So this one's brightness, and if you can crank it up all the way, it doesn't actually fill the whole canvas white, it just creates more space for the white. So the same one goes for brightness, and you can see that this is a -50. It darkens and saturates the colors just a little bit. And obviously you want to use them combined. So for example, this is brightness and contrast +50, and this is brightness and contrast -50. So overall, you want to base it off of the picture, and you want to be very gentle with these. You don't want to go -50 most of the time. You want to be like +5, -3, +10, etc. So the next one is actually, here is hue, saturation, luminosity, which is the most one that I sometimes use. There's a shortcut for it, which is Control U. So if I have this picture and I selected a part of the image, I can click Command U or Control U, and it's the same dialog, but the thing is, this is destructible. So this, once you change it, there is no way to turn it off a few hours later, because it's going to be part of the image and it's going to be embedded. So it is best to have a separate layer adjustment for that. So it's pretty easy to understand, and I'm going to explain it to the best I can. So in this one, you can see that hue is the colors that are getting affected. So you can see this right here the best. So this goes here, and it's rendered in real time, and you can see that the more I pull it, the more change you see in colors. And for new people, it could be confusing, but it's actually pretty simple to understand. So if you have it and you want to look at it as, this one is hue only for colors, saturation is making your colors more saturated or less saturated, luminosity, simply put, is just adding black or removing black from the image, from the colors that you have. So this one is grayed out. Some other softwares have it color wheeled, but it's pretty simple to understand. The more right you go, the more right you go on the color wheel. So if you see this color wheel on the right side, this is going to be the same for this. So if you go 0, right, you have it at 0, and for example you have orange, which is right here, and then if you pull it to the right side, the next color to orange is yellow and green. So our orange turned green. And the same goes for the blue that we had. So you have blue, that is right here, and then you pull it to the right and it turns into purple, that is on this side. And the same goes for the opposite side. You want to turn left, you can just slide it to the left, and the entire color palette of the image is going to turn left. Pretty easy to add warmth or remove blue from your image. So generally speaking, for saturation, it's pretty easy to put too much, so be very careful with it. So if you go all the way up, it's going to show you what the colors are, and all the way down, it's turning the picture into black and white. So if you go here, and you can see that I added 20 saturation, and when you do saturation, in general, you want to darken the picture. If you darken the picture, it looks better. And if you can see, you go into the darks, you saturate. If you lighten it, saturate, you wanna lighten it just a little bit. That's the general rule that could be used. It's not always the case, but that's generally how you should be working. And in general, as you can see on this side, the cool colors are usually blue, darks are blue, and bright colors are usually either yellow or red or orange. That's very general. It doesn't happen all the time in real life. Sometimes there are exceptions. If I generally want to make a picture darker and cooler, I can very quickly go into saturation settings, remove some of the yellow. So to the left is removing yellow, to the right is adding yellow. Left blues, right yellows. It's just talking in general terms. So if I want to make it darker, I want to go blue, and I go to the left. If I want to make it more saturated, because it's darker, I want to go to the right. And once I add saturation, you always want to darken it. So -20, +20, -20. And so you can see that the image becomes more like a sunset instead of more like a midday with some colors in the sky. You see the water became more cyan, and all of this became darker. So this one is the opposite. I added yellow, I desaturated just a little bit, I added white. So these are the opposite of what you should be achieving. The next filter is actually called Pasteurization, and it's right here, the third one. And it's a very interesting filter. It could be used for many different things, but when you create it, you basically split up your colors into different tones. So the less you go, the more broken up the image is going to be. So it depends on your stylistic choice, or for example, to start a painting, the more left you go, the more it's going to turn into RGB. So you can see there's the red, the blue, the white, the yellow, the black. So basically, very simply put, it's breaking down the colors into smaller pieces. And if you can't see it, I can zoom in. And you can see it gives this halftone effect that is basically a printmaking effect. And the more I go to the right, the more I get the colors. So the more quote-unquote normal it looks from previous, and the more left I go, the more it's broken up. An easy way to use this would be, for example, if I have too many edges, right? If I have a painting and I just have so much airbrushing. A lot of people use airbrush for their painting, so I'm actually gonna paint just a little bit. And I have airbrush, and I'm gonna use red one, right? And I just do it and do it. And sometimes people overdo it with airbrushing. So for example, here you can see that it's getting red and red and red and red, right? And it's very, very soft, and I don't want it to be soft. You can go into Pasteurization and say, yeah, I want to break it down just a little bit. Keep in mind that you want to put it under. And now you can see that it's trying its best to break it down into bigger colors. So now if I do 4 or 5 or 6, you can see it's a red circle, and that's it, and purple around it. It's not keeping that airbrush anymore. Keep in mind that every single filter, you can use it on different opacity and different layer styles. So for example, I go here and I want, okay, well, I've broken down these colors, right? And I'll go, well, that's too much. And I can go into opacity and maybe do like 35. And now I get some texture and breaking up the colors, but I don't lose the quality of the picture. So it's a good way of adding some texture to your painting. It's pretty nice. You can of course also use it, for example, I only want to lighten colors, and I can just go into maybe 15. 15 is good. And now you can see it's only going to affect lighten images, just these parts, but it's not going to affect as much as darks. So right here, you can barely see the effect. If you go, for example, the opposite of like just darken, now you can see that effect very strongly and unifying those darker colors, but barely touching those light colors. So you can see right here, the darks are pretty unified, the yellows are not as much. So if I go lighten, you see the orange changed, the white changed, the black didn't change so much. Another easy one to explain is going to be reverse gradient, and it's pretty simple. It's just invert colors. So you can see that this is blue, now it's green. This is blue, now it's green. If you have it red, it's going to be cyan. That's right here. These are more interesting and they're used more in photography. So these are actually the most useful ones that you can find in Clip Studio Paint. So if you go here and you can see that it has a little icon, levels. So if you go here, these are right here. These are level corrections and tone corrections, which is called tone curve. These are very similar and they're just different ways of approaching the same problem. So for example, when you make one, and you can see that it gives you this graph. And it's pretty confusing for people who don't know what is happening. So let me explain. So imagine this is your picture, but it's broken up into colors, which is RGB, because every single digital painting can be broken up into RGB. In Clip Studio Paint, you can see that there's green, blue, red, and black. The white is neutral, or it doesn't really matter, just the background. So as you can see, this is going to be your blacks. This is going to be your whites. And this is going to be your midtones. So you can see right here, this is black, white, and midtones. And if I push the black, you can see that the dark became more apparent. And there's a little bit less midtones, and you can see that it changes depending on how you use the levels correction. So if I want to add white, I can just add white right here. Keep in mind that this filter specifically, it changes the hue and saturation like a lot. If you add here, I actually can explain this. So RGB, every image consists of RGB, and you can fix and alter each color individually. So in here, you can see that the blacks starting somewhere here, but on the image, they start right here actually. And the whites start right here. These are all the colors that meet, green, blue, and red, and they turn into black. And they start right here. But our image, as you can see, only starts right here. So I can see this and I say, okay, well, I need more contrast in this image. I don't have enough whites in my image. So I can just push it right here somewhere. And you can see that now it's more balanced. There's more white, but it didn't destroy the picture. This is how to use the levels. You can also do the same thing, but in terms of color, not just black and white. You can also go into each individual channel. These are called channels. So reds, there's a lot of red in my image. You can see there's a lot of red in highlights and a little bit in the blacks. You can see that there's a lot of greens in the black, then there's blue, then there's red. So in this one specifically, I went into each channel and I fixed every single channel individually. So if you come here and you see this is where the whites start for red, this is where it was, and then I just lifted. So this is going to give you like a more natural way of looking at the picture, more balanced color. So it's not actually going to be unified, it's going to be very spread out. So if you want to have a monotone, kind of like just red picture with red paint with some pinks and a little bit of orange, contemporary colors. So for example, if you choose 3 colors right here, when you try to fix it through RGB, through the red, green, and blue, it's actually trying to spread it out more evenly and make it better for the overall color. And it depends on stylistic choice if you want to keep it or not. So I went ahead into each one. I pushed the green. I pushed the blue right here. You can see this is all empty for the blue. And I pushed it right here. So now you can see that it's more realistic, less whimsical, and the colors are more balanced, right? And this one is actually, if I try to balance it, but only using the unified, so the RGB slider for everything, I pushed the blacks just a bit and I pushed the whites just a bit. So this is the midtone, and you can see this, the little spike, usually that's the midtone. The biggest spike on top, that's the midtones. So this is the midtones, and I actually want to push it somewhere here. That's better. So I pushed the midtones just a little bit. And again, you always want to go and crank it up all the way to see what's going to happen. So if I go here and I push all the midtones, you can see that it changes the image. I'm mostly changing these, the midtones in the middle right here. So if I add more white, so there's more white, and then now there's more black in midtones. And it changes the saturation and hue as I was explaining earlier. Another way to use levels adjustments is actually using only one of these without touching the other. And you can always combine those. But basically, in this one specifically, I can see that I said blue added, and you go into blue channel. And I actually pushed the whites right here, so it added more of a blue in terms of color. I didn't touch anything else. I didn't touch green, I didn't touch red, I didn't touch RGB. This is only pushing this one slider. This is the image that you get. So by using only one slider, you can achieve a lot. So you can see that our black and white, completely monochrome gradient, it added some of the blue. So now this is all blue now. You can see on the triangle right here on the right side that it's actually added a lot of blue in it. And I actually did the same exact filter, but I removed the blue. So I pushed the black that was right here. I pushed it right here. And now you can see that it removed the blue from the darks. It removed the blue for the image. And when you remove the blue, you can see it adds yellow. It adds green, because green and red now are dominating. And you can see that this is the image that you get. So I did the same thing. I pushed the whites of the green right here, and I added more green into the highlights. And as again, I was saying, I'm gonna add this whole chart and images to compare to each other. So I used the green again. I pushed the blacks, made it more purple, more red. So you don't wanna go overboard with it, but that's the general term. So the same thing, push the whites of the red and pushed the darks of the red right here. Tonal curves. Tonal curves is almost the same, but it's just a little bit different. So it's next to each other, and sometimes some people use it in terms of preference. Sometimes you want to use it to be less destructive. It doesn't affect the saturation as much, but it's pretty much the same thing. So if I open it, you can see that usually when you open it, you see this. So this is the same exact graph that you have in levels, but you have a curve right here, and you're able to change that curve. So if you click here or here or here, you can add points to it. And once you add points, you can adjust the image colors and saturation and brightness, etc. So if you go here, you can see that this is the darkest part, this is the whitest part. 255 is the whitest color that you can get, and 0 is the darkest. So this is your midtones right here. And this is an empty spot. So in levels, you could push that. In here, it's a little bit trickier to push those highlights. So it's a little bit different interface, but it has the same exact channels. It has red, green, and blue. And so I wanted to show you how can you change it. So it's more intuitive than levels, and it's less technical. So I pushed midtones. I picked one right here, and I just pushed it all the way down. And as you can see, it made this curve right here. So it pushed all the midtones, all of these, right down. It's the bottomest, the lowest part for midtones that you can ever get. This is as far as it can go. I did the opposite of this. I pushed all of the midtones right here. I pushed it all the way, and now you can see the entire image got brighter, but it didn't touch as much of the darks right here or the whites right here. So in photography, there's a quick trick to make something more contrasty. So it's called the S-curve. And the reason why it's called the S-curve is because you add one point where the darks are, one point where the whites are, and you push the whites whiter and you push the darks darker. And you can do obviously the opposite to reduce contrast. You just push the blacks up, which means you highlight them, you make them whiter, and you can darken the highlights and keep the midtones in the middle. So I barely touched the midtones pushed down just a little bit, and you can see less contrast in the entire image. In here, I actually touched the entire curve, the points. I didn't add anything here. I added one in the middle just to keep it, and then I just pushed the blacks. So if you grab the blacks, you can actually just lift them. You can lift all the way up, and you can, I don't like the blacks in here. It's too dark, and I want to go, okay, well, I'm gonna add more to it. I add more white to the entire image. And you can do the same one with the black. You can just be like, okay, well, I want to add the black to the entire image. You can just push this one down, and that's it. So these are very useful, and you can do the same exact thing like you did with levels on each RGB, green, blue, and red. So I want to push the midtones darker. I want to push the midtones of reds darker. I want to increase red in the image. I want to take away the red. It's pretty self-explanatory at this point. The next one is even more interesting, and I think that's the most one that I use in my daily paintings. You can see that in right here, color balance. It's literally just for colors, and it's very similar to here, but it's more targeted toward obviously color balance. It doesn't adjust the contrast as you would want to. It does adjust it, but you don't have much control over it. So when you make one, you can see this. You open color balance and you can see these numbers, and then you can see cyan, red, magenta green, yellow, blue. And it's pretty confusing to look at it like this. But if once you have your mind into it, once you think about it in a different way, then it's way easier to, slide those. So I actually drew exactly what the color correction is. So if you open this, you can see that it's exactly the same. The cyan is right here, cyan is right here. Red is right here, red is right here. And you can see the same one for everything that is the rest of it. And also think about how does it look on the color wheel. So this is the color wheel. Reds are right here, and cyans are actually on the opposite. Purples right here, and greens opposite again. So basically this wheel is helping you to understand this to understand this. Obviously, I'm going to make a cheat sheet so it's easier for you guys, and you can see that. So in this one, it's very important to understand midtones, shadows, and highlights. Here it's called halftone, but you can think of this as a midtone. And I barely use the Magenta and green, but you can use it on your own. Check it out, mess with it, best way to learn. So in here, generally speaking, again, cool colors are darks and warm colors are brights. And here I added more blue in my shadows. So cool color shadows, I added blue, I added cyan. And then you can see that in highlights, I did the same thing. I added cyan and I added blue. So now the entire image has more blue in it, more cyan in it, and it became cooler. It's not as warm anymore. So if this looks like a summer beach, this looks more like a winter beach where it's colder and it's not as warm. Another big thing in here you want to keep in mind is color balance. There's keep brightness. Keep brightness is hard to explain, but the easiest way to say and think about it is this: if you keep it off without the check mark, it is less destructive. It's not going to be affecting the image as much, and it's not going to destroy it as much. So you can crank it all the way up and it's going to be okay looking. It's not going to be completely offsetting and off-putting. And if you keep it on, you can see that it messes with values a lot more. So basically, you can think of this, oh, I just want to mess with colors just a little bit. But if I want to mess with values as well, you can keep the brightness on and you get the entire image to go all the way up, and you can have more effect in it. So I made the same exact filter right here as I added blue, but right here, I didn't keep the brightness. So again, I'm gonna post this image later and you can just see the differences. So the same thing without the keep brightness, same thing with red. So I added cyan, I added red, I added yellow and red, warm colors, added more warm to the image. And the same thing for highlights, added red, added yellow. And then I did the same thing, except I didn't say keep the brightness. I did the same thing with green. So I actually messed around here with my midtones. And you can see I added green. And if you don't like to use the numbers, so the numbers are assigned, this one affects the first row, this one affects the second row, this one affects the third row. And you can mess around with shadows, halftones, and highlights. And this is the midtones. This you could use to add more purple or more green. So I added some green to midtones and the entire image became more green. Same thing except no brightness. Here I added purple to midtones, same thing, keep brightness. And also there's two last adjustment layers that you want to see that are pretty important. One of them is amazing and one of them is okay. So this one's called Binarization, and usually if you're coming from Photoshop, it's called threshold. So right here you can actually see that if you make one, it's called threshold. So if you add it, you can see that it's going to try to make your image and turn it to black and white to the best ability. So if you remember the black and white right here, it's going to try to break it down, but very harshly. Keep in mind that this is made actually for breaking down the image, but it keeps it very harsh. So if you can see that it's actually pixel art, there's no soft transitions. So if you want to make something vector, for example, vector-like, very, very sharp, no transitions, very, very harsh, you can actually use this to your advantage. And you can actually check your composition with it. So if you want to say, well, where are my darks? And you can go all the way left, and it's gonna find your first darks. So right here is my darkest part of the image. This is going to show me the lightest part of the image. So right here, the clouds are the lightest part, and some of the highlights are in the water, and one is on the building. And you can use this as a composition tool as well. So if I go in the middle and I'm like, okay, well, this breaks down pretty nicely. This is sky. You can see the building. You can see the water highlights. And it's pretty nice. Keep in mind, you can also use it for only, for example, multiply. Now it's only doing the darks. So I don't want to have it like this. I want to have it like this. And now I quickly added black into most of my blacks. Right here you can see cool and the gradient, added black, but everything else is untouched. And the last one is pretty big deal. If you learn how to use it, it's going to be a time saver and it's going to be amazing. So it's called gradient maps. Gradient maps are amazing. And the way gradient maps work is if you have an image that is black and white, the way to color image, if you ask yourself, well, I have this black and white painting and I don't know how to add color in Photoshop or paint, Clip Studio Paint, because it's complicated. I don't really get what's happening. Because when I go, most of people, they make a new color, they go color, and they say, well, I want to add blue. And they add blue. And it works for some parts, and sometimes it doesn't. So you can see there's still black. It's super black. And you can't really do anything about it. That's it. That's as far as you can go. No matter how much you try, it's not going to work. You can't just replace this. But gradient maps is actually letting you replace whatever you want based on black and white image. So imagine you have a painting and it's black and white, and now you have this painting. So let's pretend this is my painting, and I add gradient map. I go layer, correction layer, gradient map, which is at the very bottom, and I add it, and now I have these options. So this is going to make a gradient out of a black and white image and replace every single value with that gradient. And keep in mind that it works on color as well. So not just black and white, but it turns your picture black and white, and then it replaces everything else in your image. So Clip Studio Paint is great enough to give you already a set of gradients that you can use for later. And it has different names, or for example, night sky or sunset. And you can see that this gradient is replicating this. This is black and white, and it turns everything into that color. And it's pretty useful. It's like the most useful tool that you can ever get. And if you don't want to paint like a lot and you want to save time or get an initial color scheme, it's amazing. So let's say I want to paint the sky into blue, and I want to go into layer, gradient map, and I can do blue sky, right? And it doesn't look too good because it covered everything. But so I have the mask, and I can just do black, and I can just do command backspace to fill, and now you can have the entire mask that is black, which means it's not showing at all. And I can go with a brush and I click white. So white is going to show things, and I can go here and very slowly it's going to paint whatever I'm coloring with white. But also keep in mind that it's useful and pretty nice to use gradual painting. So if I want to paint this part only right here, and I go brush, and I can pick an airbrush, right? And set my brush density pretty low. So now I can only add blue sky to some parts without destroying the entire image. And it's very, very useful when you have a lot of materials. So gradients are as good as you make them. Some gradients are actually mimicking real life objects. So if you go here, this is actually called sunset gold. And the reason why is it this way is because you can see that it's actually replicating gold material, and if your values are great, so if you have a black and white picture that is painted very, very good and it looks like gold with highlights and everything, you can just go ahead, get this gradient and paint on top of whatever whatever is your painting, and that would turn your entire image into gold. So in here I can add more gold and sunset into this image without working too much. So basically, if you want to add some very, very slight tints of some color into the image, you can get a big soft brush, set up the gradient for red, and you just can paint on the mask that is black. So if I want to add some red into here, I can just go right with a soft brush, and I added more red to the rocks, added more red to the beach, and I can just dial it down by maybe 50%, and now I just color adjusted the entire foreground without too much work. You can see the difference just a little bit. It's pretty easy. It's it depends on your gradient. It works sometimes very well, sometimes it doesn't. Make very good gradients. Look into how to make very good gradients. It really depends on your material. Sometimes it's simple as make it 2 colors. Sometimes you need to make like 10 colors. So it really depends. And the best part is you can reuse those gradients later down the line, and you don't have to make new ones because they all get saved. So you have a whole library of them. So you can see that you can add different gradients and you can slide them around to make the image, depending on the image, make it darker or brighter. So for example, if I want to make everything dark, I'll pick a very dark blue, right? And I would make another color which is very, very bright. Again, it's probably going to be like a simple yellow, like here, like this. And now the dark yellow is actually creating a lot of green in the middle, and that's not what I want. I want to add position 50%, so it's in the middle. I want to add some red right here. It's very gradual. You don't want to overdo it. And now you can see there's purples in the darks. And then there's some brights in the yellow. And now you can just dial it down just a bit, maybe 40%. And you can see that I color adjusted and I unified the entire painting with just one gradient. And it's pretty useful. And you can also use this with different color layers. So multiply or add or overlay or lighten, for example. Let's see what lighten does. You see, it only affected some of the lighter part, the darker parts. It didn't affect the blacks. So it's pretty useful. Depending on your workflow, depending on your painting, keep that in mind. Only darken. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and happy painting. I will be posting an image on the description, and maybe I'll share this layer with you. So have fun.